Good evening and welcome to tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Thabita Akor. Let's begin. Tonight, we begin not with the day's headlines, but with a moment of remembrance. Before examining the latest development across Ambazonia, we pause to honor the lives and legacies of two individuals whose contributions continue to be remembered by many. Former Vice President Ateh and Endeley, former Director of ABC Networks 24. Their service, leadership, and dedication left an enduring imprint on the Ambazonian movement. Now, as we reflect on their lives, we also remember all those who have lost their lives in the course of the struggle. Their sacrifices, convictions, and commitment remain part of Ambazonia's collective history. From remembrance, we will then turn to the major stories shaping Ambazonia today. Workers at the Limbe City Council threatening an indefinite strike over 9 months of unpaid salaries. Also tonight, residents in Bambili taking matters into their own hands in a crackdown on suspected drug dealers and users. And other significant developments from across the territory today we will examine. Stay with us as we begin with the prime headlines. Honoring the legacy of Ambazonia's patriot, Vice President Ateh and Endeley. Also tonight, French Cameroonian soldiers killed 3 unarmed young men in mistaken identity shooting in Widikum. Also tonight, Limbe City Council workers set to launch indefinite strike over 9 months of unpaid salaries. Tonight, we'll also take a look at grief engulfs Bamenda as 2 siblings swept away by floodwaters are laid to rest. And with that, we head on to the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. Well, also tonight, on African scene, Amnesty urges South Africa to end vigilante harassment of migrants. And on news across the globe, India's Gen Z protest movement rules out immediate political ambitions. Now, the full briefings. Tonight, Mrs. Yoti Endeley, affectionately known as Endeley, was a woman whose life exemplified service, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the Ambazonian cause. To many, she was not simply the Director General of ABC Networks 24, she was a mother, a mentor, and a steadfast believer in the power of journalism to serve a nation. At a time when Ambazonia sought to make its voice heard beyond its borders, Endeley dedicated herself to building ABC Networks 24 into a trusted platform through which the stories, struggles, hopes, and resilience of the Ambazonian people could reach the world. Her journey in broadcasting began long before ABC Networks 24, with years of experience in television and later a career in healthcare in the United States. She could have chosen a quiet retirement. Instead, she chose service, once again devoting the final years of her life to strengthening an institution she believed would become the voice of Ambazonia. Endeley understood that the duty of a news director extended beyond producing broadcasts. She believed journalism must preserve history, uphold truth, amplify the voice of ordinary people, the Ambazonian people, and stand as a witness to the defining moment of the nation's journey. Those convictions became the foundation of her leadership. She led with dignity, humility, professionalism, and courage. She inspired journalists to pursue excellence, to report with responsibility, and never to lose sight of the people they served. Her leadership helped shape not only a television network, but also a generation of media practitioners committed to the ideals she cherished. For Ambazonians, her contribution was far greater than the newsroom here. She helped ensure that a people's story would not go untold, that their experiences would be documented, and that their voice would continue to resonate beyond their homeland. Let's take a look.
First of all, I want to greet all Ambazonians. I want to, and the rest of the world, everybody who's watching us, all our friends, our partners, and even our enemies. I always like to thank our enemies because that is the reason why we are where we are today. We just want our independence restored so that we negotiate with them on the same footing. We don't care their size. They have the size of territory. We are smaller, but we are the people holding the economy of LRC. We produce 61% or more of the GDP. That is why Britain, France, they don't want us to have our independence, because they know what they are getting from us, which is a contract that was signed with LRC. But you see, they need to come and sign contracts now with us, because this is our territory, and we're not letting it go. You know, as we said, till the last man standing.
You could sense the passion, the devotion in her voice. Now we'll see that today, Ambazonia remembers one of its devoted daughters. Though Endeley is no longer with us, the institution she nurtured, ABC 24, the journalist she inspired, and the legacy she leaves behind will continue to bear witness to a life dedicated to service. May her memory remain a blessing, and may her legacy continue to inspire every Ambazonian to serve with integrity, courage, and an unwavering love for the nation. Also tonight, we remember the legacy of Vice President Ateh, whose life was devoted to the pursuit of the Ambazonian cause. His journey was one of commitment, an unwavering devotion, conviction, sacrifice, and a belief in the right of the Ambazonian people to determine their own future. As Vice President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, he stood at the forefront of the government's diplomatic and political engagement, dedicating himself to advancing the aspirations of the Ambazonian people on the international stage. Those who worked alongside him remember a leader whose courage, discipline, and integrity earned him the respect of many within the movement. His leadership came at a defining moment in Ambazonia's history, when the need for unity, resilience, and international engagement was greater than ever. Through his service, Vice President Ateh remained steadfast in advocating for justice and in pursuing what he believed to be the legitimate aspirations of all Ambazonians. His commitment was not limited to political leadership alone. Vice President Ateh also played a significant role in strengthening the Ambazonian Broadcasting Corporation 24, recognizing that the media would remain central to informing the people, preserving history, and ensuring that Ambazonia's story continue to reach audiences around the world. His vision helped reinforce ABC Networks 24 as a platform through which the voices of Ambazonians would continue to be heard during one of the most defining chapters in the nation's history. Let's take a look.
My dear Ambazonians, My fellow comrades, you're all welcome to this gathering focused on a rather adverse historical event that affected our collective destiny as a nation. On this day, 51 years ago, that is on May 20th, 1972, our fate as a subjugated people was apparently sealed by the genocidal annexationist regime of La République du Cameroun led by Amadou Ahidjo, with a fake referendum aimed at unifying our two countries. After the failed decolonization process that led to the annexation and recolonization of our territory, La République du Cameroun, ill-counseled by their French masters, thought the smarter move was to organize a sham referendum and yoke us to their independent state. They believed that would seal the deal and the so-called imposed federation, which at least reminded us and the world that we were two states of equal status that tried to come together, that we will be buried and will be forgotten for good. This Machiavellian agenda was well planned with the help of the French. Or else, how could one explain the reason for La République du Cameroun voting no to our independence during the United Nations General Assembly vote?
Today, Ambazonia remembers not a vice president, not only a vice president, but also a statesman, a diplomat, and a devoted servant of his people. His life stands as a reminder that leadership is measured not only by the offices one holds, but by the sacrifices one is willing to make in service of a nation. Though Vice President Eric Ateh is no longer with us, his legacy endures through the institutions he strengthened, the principles he upheld, and the countless Ambazonians who continue to draw inspiration from his life of service. May his memory forever remain a source of strength, and may his dedication to Ambazonia continue to inspire future generations to lead with courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to Ambazonia, the nation they love. Now joining us tonight is our legal mind, Barrister Mbeshia. Good evening, Barrister Mbeshia.
Good evening.
Today we have quite a lot to deal with on the show today, but then before we get into the details, we just needed to remember the legacy of our Ambazonian patriots. Today we are talking about Vice President Eric Ateh and Endeley, two individuals who served Ambazonia in different but equally significant capacities. Now, looking at their lives, what common values define their service to the nation, Barrister Mbeshia? I know you must have worked very closely with them.
Well, there's something very important that links them together. The first one is natural. How they died almost at the same time. Both of them died almost at the same time. Both of them died of natural causes. Something that is very, very important to us is the addition to Ambazonia. They live in one town, they live in different places. They were born in one town, they were born in different places. But their activities in the liberation of Ambazonia will occupy chapters, if not books. I say these are two who each in his or own did everything that was human. Ma, for example, we remember her as a woman who fought until she died. But she didn't die. She left behind us ABC, on which we are talking about, and which hopefully is going to go the generation to come. And so she left, even on her sick bed. It is a wonderful achievement that can never be forgotten in the history of Ambazonia. I go VP Ateh, a sick person for a long time. But he left us the commitment to liberate Ambazonia. And I remember his last words on his dying bed: fight this fight until we take it to the end. And so again, it's very coincidental that these two icons, these two generals, they didn't carry weapons, but they carried the weapons of education through radio, of education through administration and persistence. And so as I've just future historians, when they write books about it, I'm sure each of them will occupy not less than a chapter in that future book. And so they have taught us the why they are no longer here somewhere else watching. But for the generation that are still here, it's very late from them. There's a lot. That this fight was not a fight for strong people. It's a fight for people who are committed. But these two, those sick, physically sick, they were committed to the last minute of their lives. And so they don't regret, if there's anything at all, they don't regret the fought. And we should not make them regret. Because we have to continue to the end of the world. Until wherever they are resting, they will see that we did not fight in vain. We did not put in our efforts in vain. And so that is over to you.
You've well put it together by Barrister Mbeshia. But then, now let's look at the life of Vice President Eric Ateh. He dedicated his life to political leadership and diplomacy of the Ambazonian government, while Endeley spearheaded the ABC networks, as you just mentioned, and that's why we are celebrating her legacy. She ensured that Ambazonian story reached the world. Now, as we remember and celebrate their legacy, how important are these two pillars, leadership and the media, in sustaining the struggle? Do we have you? Do we have you right there, Barrister Mbeshia? All right. So as we also remember all our fallen heroes today, we'll take our mind back to think about their commitment, their service, their sacrifice to Ambazonia. Do we have Barrister Mbeshia? This is a direct message to all Ambazonians, especially the younger generation, to learn from the sacrifices, the service of our heroes, Vice President Eric Ateh and Endeley. Well, with this, we'll head over to the next on our report. Let's get to see what is happening from the home front while we reconnect with Barrister Mbeshia. Tonight, 3 young men were shot dead on Sunday at Widikum in what the French Cameroun military has described as a case of mistaken identity, after soldiers opened fire on unarmed civilians who had mounted a roadblock to solicit support for road repairs. Now, according to eyewitness account and family members, the 3 youths had on Sunday, August 2nd, 2026, morning organized community labor to grade a road leading to the local market. After the work, they decided to set up a roadblock to ask passing motorists and traders for contributions to support their effort. It was at that point that an approaching team of French Cameroon military personnel reportedly mistook them for Ambazonian State Army who had mounted a checkpoint. Without any professional verification, the soldiers opened fire and killed the 3 boys instantly. A witness told this reporter it was only after the shooting that they realized that these were just innocent civilians who had been cleaning and repairing the road and were begging for support to continue the work. Sadly, the victims died on the spot. The killings have plunged the community into grief. Families and residents are calling for a thorough investigation into the incident and for those responsible to be held accountable. These were young men trying to help their community, a relative said. They were not fighters. They had buckets and hoes, not guns. How did the soldiers mistake them? Now we'll see that civil society actors in Ambazonia say the incident highlights the danger civilians continue to face amid the ongoing war in southern Cameroon in the hands of French Cameroon soldiers, where checkpoints, fear, and lack of clear identification have led to tragic outcomes. Now, military authorities have described the shooting as mistaken identity, but will the people receive that? They have not yet released an official statement with further details on the circumstances or on whether disciplinary measures will be taken. Human rights groups have repeatedly urged security forces to apply rules of engagement that prioritize verification and protection of civilians, especially in communities undertaking self-help projects. Sadly, the bodies of the 3 young men have been deposited at the mortuary as families prepare burial arrangements. Now, community leaders are appealing to both French Cameroon State Army to ensure that civilians going about legitimate activities are not targeted and that due process is expected. This is indeed a painful story. Do we still have Barrister Mbeshia? Now we'll move ahead to what is happening in Bambili. Years of growing frustration over the spread of hard drugs in Bambili boiled over on Monday, August 3rd, when residents took matters into their own hands, storming an alleged drug den and arresting several suspected dealers and users. The community-led operation targeted a location a resident identified as a hub for the sale and consumption of illicit drugs in the university town of Tuba subdivision, southern Cameroon. Witnesses said the suspects were rounded up during the raid as locals sought to confront what they described as an escalating drug problem. Let's take a look. The video on your screen showed some of the suspects being surrounded by a crowd shortly after their arrest. The footage also shows several individuals being physically assaulted by residents before the videos ended. Now, for many in Bambili, the raid was the culmination of months of concern over the increasing presence of hard drugs, particularly among young people. Residents say the growing drug trade has fueled insecurity and social disorder, leaving many to question whether enough is being done to curb the menace. Now, although the operation succeeded in apprehending several suspects, it remains unclear whether they were later handed over to security forces for investigation and possible prosecution. Authorities had not commented on the incident at the time of publication. However, the raid highlights mounting public frustration over the proliferation of illicit drugs in Ambazonia and the urgent calls for stronger law enforcement efforts to address the people and the problem before it worsens. So tonight, over to Limbe. Frustration is mounting at the Limbe City Council as workers threaten to embark on an indefinite strike over 9 months of unpaid salaries, accusing the municipal administration of ignoring repeated appeals to resolve the prolonged wage crisis. Employees say the strike could begin within days if Mayor Paul Ifom Ngale fails to clear the outstanding salaries or engage staff over their grievances. A council employee who spoke to Undaunted News on condition of anonymity for fear of reprisal said workers have not received salaries for 9 months and have been left without any official communication explaining the delay or outlining when payment will be made. Now, according to the worker, the salary crisis has been reported several times to the senior divisional officer for FACO, who has allegedly urged the mayor to settle the arrears. Despite those interventions, the employee claimed that the administration has taken no meaningful action. The source further alleged that the mayor has neither met with workers nor publicly addressed the concerns, leaving staff increasingly frustrated as many struggle to meet their basic needs. The latest standoff revives a recurring labor dispute at the council. Last year, workers similarly complained of going nearly 10 months without pay. But many chose not to speak publicly after colleagues who raised the issue were reportedly issued query letters by the council administration. Now, the planned industrial action is expected to affect the delivery of municipal services if no agreement is reached. Now, by the time of publication, Mayor Paul Ifom Ngale and the Limbe City Council had not responded publicly to the allegations or the workers' threats to down tools. Now, let's move ahead. Here's an update of what we brought to you yesterday. A wave of grief has swept through Bamenda, following the burial of 2 young siblings who drowned after being swept away by floodwaters in the Ntarikon neighborhood, with heartbreaking scenes of mourning captured as family members, parents, and residents gathered to bid them a final farewell. 7-year-old Azah Marie and her 5-year-old brother, Say Emmanuel, were laid to rest days after their bodies were recovered from the Mulang swamp by the Army Rescue Unit following an intensive search. The tragedy unfolded on Sunday after heavy rains triggered flash floods across parts of Bamenda. According to eyewitnesses, Marie's shoe was swept away by the rushing water, prompting the 7-year-old to move closer to the swollen stream in an attempt to retrieve it. She was reportedly caught by the powerful current and also carried away. Witnesses said Emmanuel immediately ran after his sister in a desperate attempt to rescue her, but was also overwhelmed by the fast-moving floodwaters. Both children disappeared beneath the water, sparking frantic rescue efforts by residents and emergency responders. Now, after hours of searching, the Army Rescue Unit, led by Senior Warrant Officer Taku Paul, recovered the children's bodies from the Mulang swamp on Monday morning, bringing a really heartbreaking end to the operation. Now, videos circulating on social media at the funeral today show scenes of profound sorrow and grief as mothers, parents, relatives, and members of Ntarikon community wept openly while the 2 children were laid to rest. Many struggled to contain their emotions as the young siblings were given their final farewell. Let's take a look. Now, the death have renewed concerns over the dangers posed by seasonal flooding in Bamenda, where heavy rains frequently overwhelm drainage systems and create life-threatening conditions for residents, particularly children. Now, community members have renewed calls for improved drainage infrastructure, stronger flood prevention measures, and greater public awareness to reduce the risk of similar tragedies during the rainy season. Authorities have also continued to urge parents and guardians to keep children away from swollen streams, rivers, and floodwaters, warning that rapidly moving water can become deadly within seconds. Now with that, we head over to news on African scene. Harassment of migrants. Amnesty International South Africa has called on the government to take urgent action against vigilante groups accused of targeting migrants through unlawful identity checks, intimidation, forced evictions, and other acts of harassment. The rights group said the continued abuse of migrants and people perceived to be undocumented violates fundamental human rights and undermines the rule of law. It warned that the state's failure to stop such actions has contributed to a growing culture of vigilantism across communities. According to Amnesty International, members of vigilante groups have allegedly demanded identification documents from migrants, forcibly removed people from their homes and businesses, damaged or looted property, and publicly humiliated victims. In some cases, the organization said police officers present during the incident failed to intervene as suspected undocumented migrants were targeted. The organization said videos circulating on social media right there on your screen and reports from local media indicate that acts once widely condemned are becoming increasingly accepted, raising concerns over the normalization of anti-migrant violence in our communities. Now, Amnesty International South Africa Executive Director Shinila Mohammed said authorities must move beyond public statement and ensure those responsible for unlawful acts are investigated and prosecuted. The organization also called for investigations into allegations of police inaction or possible complicity, insisting that any officers found to have violated the law should face disciplinary and criminal proceedings. Amnesty noted that South Africa's Immigration Act does not permit private individuals or community groups to enforce immigration laws, conduct identity checks, and enter private property or remove people from their homes or businesses. Those powers, it said, are reserved for authorized immigration officials and members of the South African Police Service. The rights group stressed that all residents, regardless of their nationality or immigration status, are entitled to constitutional protections, including the rights to dignity, security, and due process. It added that undocumented migrants remain protected under both South Africa's constitution and international human rights law. Now, Amnesty International and other civil society organizations warned that rising anti-migrant rhetoric and inadequate government action could fall further discrimination, violence, and human rights abuses if left unchecked. Now, let's look at the current trend with cybercrime across Africa. Cybercrime across Africa, artificial intelligence, is now driving more than half of reported cybercrime across Africa, enabling criminals to carry out faster, more sophisticated, and large-scale digital attacks, according to Interpol's African Cyber Threat Assessment Report 2026. Now, the report found that 55% of cybercrime cases recorded across the continent involve the use of artificial intelligence, underscoring growing security concerns as Africa's digital economy and internet connectivity continue to expand. Now, drawing on data from 36 African countries, the 40-page assessment describes cybercrime as an increasingly organized cross-border enterprise that is becoming more difficult for law enforcement agencies to detect and disrupt. Online scams remain the most prevalent form of cybercrime in 2025, with criminals increasingly using artificial intelligence, social media platforms, and mobile money services to target victims. Interpol said financial losses linked to cybercrime rose sharply over the past year, increasing from about $192 million in 2024 to $484 million, driven by AI-powered fraud. And these credentials are sophisticated social engineering schemes. Interpol warned that artificial intelligence is rapidly changing the nature of cybercrime. Criminals are increasingly deploying deepfake technology and AI-generated content in digital sextortion, online harassment, and fraud schemes. One of Interpol's technology partners, Trend AI, identified about 600,000 sextortion cases linked to AI-generated content and deepfake technology. The report also recorded a rise in business email compromise attacks in which criminals use AI to create highly convincing emails impersonating trusted individuals or organizations to deceive victims into transferring money or disclosing sensitive information. It's further warned that some Africa-based cyber-criminal groups have expanded their operations beyond the continent, targeting victims in Europe and North America while using infrastructure. Interpol said weak coordination among banks, telecommunications companies, and law enforcement agencies continues to hinder efforts to combat cybercrime. The lack of real-time information sharing, it's noted, allows criminals to move stolen funds rapidly across jurisdictions before authorities can even intervene. Now, the report also found that many African law enforcement agencies remain underprepared to tackle AI-driven cyber threats despite the rapid adoption of the technology by criminal networks. Despite the growing challenge, the report highlighted progress in strengthening cybersecurity across the continent. In 2025, 17 African countries introduced or updated cybercrime legislation, while Senegal launched an online reporting platform to improve responses to cyber offenses involving children. Interpol added that for multinational operations, Operation Serengeti 2.0, Operation Contender 3.0, Operation Sentinel, and Operation Red Card 2.0 resulted in more than 1,500 arrests, the seizure of hundreds of electronic devices, and the recovery of more than $100 million linked to cybercrime. And with this, we head over to news across the globe. The youth-led Cockroach Junta Party, whose nationwide protests over examination paper leaks forced the resignation of India's education minister, has ruled out entering electoral politics for now, saying its priority is to rebuild public trust in national institutions. Speaking to Ani TV, CJP founder Abhijit Dipke said the movement will spend the coming days consulting young supporters to determine its future direction rather than preparing to contest elections. Dipke said members of the movement would meet to develop an agenda focused on issues affecting India's younger generation and discuss how to expand the campaign beyond the recent protests. He said the organization could consider transforming into a political party in the future if there is overwhelming public support, but maintained that a grassroots movement remains the most effective way to demand accountability from public institutions. Now we'll see that the Cockroach Junta Party emerged as a prominent youth movement after leading nationwide demonstrations against repeated examination paper leaks, a controversy that threw tens of thousands of students onto the streets and intensified concerns over unemployment and fairness in India's education system. The protest culminated in the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan on July 25th, with weeks of demonstration which followed after. Security forces failed to disperse despite deploying tear gas. Following the protest, the Indian government announced tougher penalties for examination malpractice and established a panel to review the country's examination system. Dipke said the movement's immediate focus would remain on representing the concerns of young Indians, many of whom have lost confidence in political leaders and public institutions. He also ruled out aligning the movement with any existing political party despite attempts by opposition groups to capitalize on the protests after returning to his hometown of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar in Maharashtra. Dibke was welcomed by hundreds of supporters. The 36-day protest also elevated him into one of India's most recognizable youth leaders, with the movement rapidly gaining millions of followers on social media. Political analysts say the movement's influence could become a factor in upcoming state elections in Uttar Pradesh, Punjab and Gujarat, although its long-term electoral impact may be more significant ahead of India's 2029 general election. Now, analysts note that if the Cockroach Janta Party eventually transforms into a political party by maintaining its focus on youth issues, it could attract growing support from young voters frustrated by unemployment and governance concerns. Dibke said he remains cautious about formally entering politics, expressing concerns that such a move could expose the organization and its leaders to political pressure and investigations. He added that his immediate concern is safety of his family after receiving threats on social media, although authorities have provided security at his residence. And with that, we've come to the end of Undaunted, bringing into the news Untold Stories. But before we go, a recap of the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. Tonight we saw honoring the legacy of Ambazonian's Patriots, Vice President Eric Ateh, Ima Endeley. Also tonight, French Cameroun soldiers killed 3 unarmed young men in mistaken identity shooting in Widikum. Limbe City Council workers set to launch indefinite strike over 9 months of unpaid salaries. Grief engulfs Bamenda as 2 siblings swept away by floodwaters are laid to rest. And on the African scene, Amnesty urges South Africa to end vigilante harassment of migrants. And in the rest of the news across the globe, India's Gen Z protest movement rules out immediate political ambition. And that is all on Undaunted tonight, bringing into the news Untold Stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted newsroom, we say thank you for joining, and we sincerely apologize for the technical breach with our commentator. We hope to connect with him soonest. Now we'll leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.